31 Coercion. Sure enough, the target search radar on the ground was constantly scanning Song Ning's plane from several directions. Although all the scans were identified as minor threats by the system, that is to say, there was no sign of being tracked by the fire control radar, but he was very knowing that their plane is getting closer and closer to the front line. Judging from the level of chaos in the Pakistani army this day, it is normal for their surface-to-air missiles to fire at them. At this time, the Phantom's wingman has always maintained an angle with the number 2 J-10. Its radar can't see itself for the time being, and it will soon run away from its own eyes. "What are you waiting for? Kill the wingman," Colonel Sami said on the radio. "No, I can't do that, it's a serious violation of discipline," Song Ning said. Then he made a move that made the colonel tremble with anger, turned to the northwest, and left the battlefield with all the ammunition. But Sami couldn't say more at the moment, because the Phantom captain was lost again under his nose. He thought that the Phantom would naturally move closer to the wingman, so he chased in the direction of the wingman indicated by Song Ning's radar at last. The Indian pilot was clearly cunning and didn't do that. His Mirage 2000H disappeared somewhere unimaginable. After Song Ning turned, Sami lost most of his surveillance range, and the 01's infrared tracking system, IRST, never worked. Obviously, the second lieutenant of the Chinese Air Force was coercing the colonel to turn back, but it was not the colonel's character to throw away his prey. He was like a reckless and tireless wolf, quickly changing his target and speeding up to chase the fleeing Phantom wingman. The altitude of this wingman is very low, and the heading changes are very small. Obviously, he followed the closest route to escape to the border. Right now, he has no intention of fighting, but he is afraid to escape at full speed due to the fuel volume. This gave Sami a chance. Using afterburner, he quickly accelerated above the speed of sound, and chased in the general direction. About 10 kilometers away, IRST found the infrared source of the Phantom wingman. The colonel carried out laser ranging several times in a row, but he did not know much about the essentials of operating the device, and the ranging could not be completed several times. The long-term continuous laser emission caused the system to start to issue a warning, and the multifunction display showed that the laser must be carried out. After a cooldown of about 70 seconds, the colonel was determined to give up the laser ranging and instead judge the distance based on experience. He has had many pursuit exercises on the Mirage 3, and it is clear that in the enemy's 6 o'clock direction, the essentials of visually measuring the distance of this type of aircraft. The distance between the two planes quickly narrowed, and it took a few dozen seconds to reach the optimal attack distance. Although the colonel still complained about Song Ning, he couldn't help but feel proud when he thought that his fighter plane would be far ahead of Hassan of the 5th Squadron. "Stand up!" The Phantom in front fell into the aperture of the J-10's IRST system without knowing it, and soon formed a track, but for Mohammed Sami, who had only one missile left, the distance was still too far. "Colonel, pay attention to the 7 o'clock direction, you are being followed." Sami turned back suddenly, and sure enough, a silver-white plane behind him was swooping down from the clouds. It was the lost Phantom leader, the distance from him about 3 kilometers. Sami turned his head, and the wingman in front also started to flee to one side. Probably when Song Ning warned him, the other party was also in touch with Double Click. He knew that he had caused trouble for Song Ning. An Indian pilot would surely have seen the plane's emblem. So the colonel made a decisive judgment, continued to chase after the first plane, and turned on the electronic jamming system at the same time, hoping to block the communication between the two planes and the base. 02 I was seen by him, and the first one was given to me, but you have to be more decisive. The colonel pressed the launch button after finishing speaking. A missile flew under the wing of the J-10, and the Phantom wingman in front was in a complete no-escape zone. As the colonel turned down to escape, he saw the Phantom fleeing to the other side, but the missiles were chasing after him with even greater overload, and he knew there would be no problem this time around. But the next problem is that it is difficult for him to escape the pursuit of the Phantom behind him. Lieutenant Ma Tangjia was chasing the plane in front of him with the August 1st military emblem painted on it. His communication was temporarily affected by altitude and electronic interference, and he was unable to transmit this amazing news back to the base. He had no time to consider whether this meant as China entered the war, he only knew that the only chance for survival was to quickly kill the Chinese plane in front of him. He had already seen that the plane had no missiles, and now was the time. The captain is very aware of the strength of the Mirage 2000. He has to use the aircraft's excellent instantaneous hovering ability to place the enemy aircraft 2 kilometers away in the missile's field of vision, but the aircraft in front is not obedient, and is desperately reducing the altitude and increasing the turn angle speed. Always hovering at a small angle from the plane's axis, which seemed to be the strategy of the enemy plane in front. He knew that the Phantom's fuel volume would not allow it to circle for a few more rounds. During the double-click chase, a violent red light flashed in the distance, and the captain turned a brick and saw his wingman pilot was ejected. That is to say, in this sneak attack, his Tiger squad has already lost most of it because of the Chinese plane that killed halfway. Thinking of this, Mathanga stepped on the pedal hard and chased after it. This is a risky move. It is easy to fall in front of the opponent by making an excessively strong turn. However, the captain is now ignited by anger, and he can't care about it at all. Anyway, today someone had to pay the price, and he decided to give the undeclared Chinese plane a good fight. 01 You have to keep your distance. I can't shoot if it's too close, Song Ning said on the radio. He finally made up his mind to take that step, but he was worried about hitting his own plane. Understood. Sammy said, pulling up the nose to increase the thrust upward. Mathanga watched the plane move from the edge of the canopy to the top of the canopy at a very fast line of sight. He was now worried that the fuel volume would not dare to use the maximum afterburner, so he had to watch the distance between the two planes gradually begin to widen. Song Ning's radar aperture had already firmly trapped the last Phantom, and soon the radar entered a 1-to-1 tracking state. This was a tracking method that all pilots were afraid of, and it was difficult to get rid of. Song Ning believed the others there must be an alarm sound in the cockpit now. Don't hesitate to make a decision, cried the colonel, gasping for breath, knowing that he could fall within the tracking range of the magic missile at any moment. Song Ning pressed the button, and the two medium-range bombs flew off the pylon one after another and flew towards the last Phantom 2000H on the battlefield. He knew that this was something he had to do and that the truth had to be covered up, otherwise the motherland would be in trouble. Diplomacy has fallen into a very passive situation. The recent update can't be done soon, and the deep sea is being rewritten, but it is almost finished, and the back of the deep sea will be changed when it is finished.